Hello YouTube, Dave here again. So today I'm going to be starting a new short series of videos where I go over alterations that I would want to make to the adventure Waterdeep Dragon Heist. I've stated before on a number of occasions that of the official 5th edition D&D adventures that have come out, Waterdeep Dragon Heist is probably my absolute least favorite. There's a lot of things that I just felt were kind of, I don't want to say necessarily poorly written, but there seems to be a lot of flawed design. One of my biggest problems with the adventure is just the fact that the player characters are along for the ride, but they never really feel like the focus or the driving force behind things that go on in the campaign. So that's something that I thought, I would want to change to make it something that I would honestly consider running. Now, again, this is my own personal opinion. These are my own personal changes. If Waterdeep Dragon Heist is your favorite adventure and you love it the way that it is, then that's great. I'm glad that, it's something that people do enjoy. I want every single one of these books that come out to be a success in their own right, but not everything's going to appeal to everyone. Another reason that I thought it might be fun to do this series of videos might be to help beginners, people who are newer to the hobby, that may not be comfortable altering or changing things in officially published materials, just to sort of show them, how you might consider what your thought process might be, and how easy it can be to alter things to sort of make it fit for the game that you want to run and the game that your group wants to play in. So we're basically going to get right into it. This is, like I said, it's going to be a series of videos. Each video will tackle one of the chapters, so I want to do it sort of chapter by chapter. It just makes it a little easier on myself because there's a lot of different things that I'm preparing or running currently. That's just sort of taking up, most of the room that I have in my memory for adventures. So I can just take, like I said, tackle it chapter by chapter. And today we're going to look at chapter 1, which is sort of the introduction to the campaign, as well as the first little taste of events to come. The way I'm going to structure this is I'm going to first go over sort of a quick timeline of the events that are supposed to happen as written in the campaign book, and then go over the changes that I would make. So, as written, Waterdeep Dragon Heist is an adventure for a group of players of levels 1 through 5. So you start with brand new first level characters in the city of Waterdeep. So the players actually begin the campaign inside of the fabled, legendary, yawning portal tavern. So it's here where they're just simply maybe relaxing for, a drink or something. And essentially what happens is a tavern brawl sort of breaks out around them. The player characters can either engage in the fight or they can decide to simply sit out of it. Again, it's just one of those things that sort of happens around them and not necessarily something that involves them as directly as something that I would kind of prefer. And so we'll get to my changes shortly. The next event that happens after the fight is broken up, either by the player character's intervention or by some of the other NPCs who are taking matters into their own hands, a troll emerges from the pit in the middle of the tavern, which is actually a entryway into, again, another legendary location in the Forgotten Realms, the legendary mega dungeon of Undermountain. So a troll actually emerges being attacked by a group of sturges, and you have Durnan, the owner of the Awning Portal, basically leaps over the counter with his greatsword drawn, attacks the troll, and directs the player characters to go after the sturges. So the NPC fights the big bad monster while the player characters swat mosquitoes. Once the fight is over, they are approached by Volo, who praises them for their tactics in either of the combats, regardless of their actions. Again, we'll sort of get into that a little bit later. But he does have a proposition for them, recognizing them as adventurous types. He is looking for his friend Floon, who went missing. He has sort of some ideas of where he was last seen, but he needs the player character's abilities in order to track down his missing friend that he is concerned about, because he feels that he feels sort of a sense of responsibility and guilt towards it. He directs the player characters to a location called the Skewered Dragon, which is, unlike the Yawning Portal, it's sort of a lower end, seedy dive bar, which is sort of openly, like an open secret, that it is actually controlled by the Zentarum, one of the villainous factions that are in play in the Forgotten Realms, and especially potentially within this campaign itself. As the player characters are making their way to the Skewered Dragon, they can come across a few events like seeing the guards, the city watch, basically capturing some thugs and arresting them and going through that process. They can also enter a shop run by a deep gnome, sort of an enigmatic character who has connections to another one of the organizations operating behind the scenes, the Xanathar's Guild, although that's more of a secret. He actually has a little bit of information about Floon, recognizes that he and someone who looked a lot like him were attacked by a group of 5 men wearing black leather armor, but beyond that he doesn't really know too much, although one of them had a black tattoo with a winged snake on his neck, so you get sort of an identifying feature. When the characters make their way to the Skewered Dragon, they eventually learn that these individuals were taken to the Zentarum hideout on Candle Lane. Here, they discover that the bodies of the Zentarum members who actually abducted Floon and this other individual who bore a striking resemblance to the man they described as Floon. They discover the bodies of those Zentarum guards and a group of Kenku assassins that have taken them out. The assassins can be questioned if any of them survive with an intimidation check. Honestly, a pretty low intimidation check, so these guys are either mercenaries or they're just super not loyal. Again, I know it's designed for first level characters, but DC 10 is pretty low. Like a character without training has pretty much a 50-50, or 55% chance of being able to meet that. But again, we'll get into that. But the Kenku basically reveal using their mimicry by, basically relaying or mimicking orders or, things that they've heard from some of the other members that they were with, that essentially the individual that they're looking for, Floon, was taken to another location by, members of the Xanathar's Guild. And they sort of give rudimentary directions on where to find them. If the player characters continue to explore the Zentarum hideout after dealing with the Kenku, they find the man who was captured alongside of him, who looks very similar to Floon, an individual by the name of Raynar Neverember. He is the son of Lord Dagnaught Neverember, who is the former Open Lord of Waterdeep before he was unceremoniously ejected from the role of Open Lord of Waterdeep due to the fact that he sort of more or less abandoned Waterdeep for the city of Neverwinter. He actually, Raynar lets them know that Floon was a friend of his. They were sort of talking about some things, and they were both attacked by the Zentarum. Raynar managed to sort of shake his bonds, but that's when the Kenku arrived, and he ended up basically hiding while the Kenku and the other members of the Xanathar's Guild that were with them came, grabbed Floon, and ran to their hideout. Following, again, some clues based off the information gathered from the Kenku assassins, the player characters are able to find the Xanathar Guild hideout, which is located within the sewers, and here they fight, the Xanathar Guild members, including coming into a room where there's a mind flayer that is speaking with one of the guild members, and the mind flayer, again, when the player characters arrive, sort of just gets up, casually walks away, and if the player characters insist on continuously attacking this thing, instead of, dealing with them as, a mind flayer probably would, the mind flayer simply, will stun them and then simply walk away or use charm to turn one of them against the rest of the party to distract, while the mind flayer kind of runs away from something that it, really shouldn't for, again, first level characters. But they do eventually find Floon, so they are able to return him to Volo, who is grateful. Unfortunately, Volo is unable to actually pay them directly. However, he does have a property that he is willing to give them in exchange for saving his friend. Now, over the course of this chapter, if the player characters actually talk in more detail with Raynar Neverember, he does mention that the reason that both he and Floon were kidnapped is because the guilds seem to think that Raynar's father, before leaving for Neverwinter, hid away a large sum of gold that is in a vault somewhere that is sort of lost to history. So that's basically chapter 1. So the player characters enter the tavern. There's, a fight that breaks out. There's a troll that attacks. Then the characters are approached by Volo to find his missing friend. Turns out his friend was abducted with another individual by the Zentarum. However, the Zentarum were attacked by the Xanathar's Guild. And in the end, the player characters managed to, rescue both of the individuals that were taken. Overall, the main series of events that take place within Chapter 1 really aren't that bad. However, there are definitely some changes that I would make. So let's get into those changes right now, shall we? So the first thing that I would definitely change about this campaign is this part here, for characters of levels 1 through 5. Honestly, the scope of the adventure that they're going through, trying to find this massive hidden vault of treasure that was secreted away by the former lord of the city, and then the enemies that the player characters are going up against. Which actually, I guess I forgot to mention the enemies. So before I get into the changes, at the beginning of the campaign, you're supposed to choose from one of 4 villainous organizations to be the main antagonist of the campaign. You have the aforementioned guilds, the Xanathar's Guild and the Zentarum, as 2 of the potential campaign villains that the player characters will go up against. But you also have a family of nobles by the name of the Castellanters, and they are a family of devil worshippers that their motivation for finding the gold is to use the gold as a bargaining chip to basically buy back the souls of their children that were sold to devils in order to Osmodius, basically for the Castellanters to have, the success and the wealth that they do. The 4th faction involved is Bregan Dearth or Bregan de Thair. I forget how you pronounce it. Again, it's a fantasy name, so just please, don't, actually me. It's a fantasy name. It's not a real name, but anyway, it's a band of drow mercenaries led by Jarlaxle, and Jarlaxle is one of my all-time favorite characters in any D&D property, period. He's charismatic, he's witty, he has a very good way of manipulating things and basically, coaxing other people to do stuff for him while he gets the credit. Again, that'll sort of factor into things as we go along. But those are your 4 factions that are sort of in play here. Each faction is tied to a season of the year, which is honestly kind of gimmicky, so it's, again, not something that I'm overly interested in doing here. You can set the adventure in any of the seasons that you want. It really doesn't matter, aside from a little bit of flavor and maybe some environmental things. Like if the player characters are involved in a chase scene and you set the campaign in winter, then there may be some icy patches that they may have to, deal with. But other than that, the season stuff, again, it just feels kind of gimmicky, but, it is what it is. So again, that's the way that it's done as written. Now for me, like I said, the first thing that I want to change is the level range, because levels 1 through 5 just is not high enough level for the players to realistically be going up against the enemies that they are, and be able to actually survive. An intelligent villain, noting that the player characters are interfering in their plans, wouldn't hesitate to dispatch a party that is as inexperienced and as weak as the players would be. I mean, you're talking about a beholder, you're talking about an archmage, you're talking about the leader of a centuries-old drow mercenary group, and the weakest faction, honestly, is the devil worshippers. But the players are just not high enough level to really deal with those threats. And one of the side effects of that is the campaign is kind of nerfed because of that. Again, we had the mind flare that the player characters encounter at the very beginning of the campaign as first level characters. And instead of it being something scary, the mind flare does everything it can to get away. Even though, again, an intelligent creature like a mind flare who might recognize them as being, maybe a little bit too brash, and would try to actually fight them off. He may try to leave out of, boredom or thinking that the player characters are beneath them. But if the characters insist on attacking him, a mind flare wouldn't hesitate to mind blast and then brain extract and then just move on, which, again, he doesn't do in the adventures written. Later on in the campaign, if the player characters are captured by the guilds themselves, Then there's stuff written in where they're essentially just knocked unconscious and dumped in an alley or back at their home with all their gear. So there's no real major setbacks for them. Again, that's stuff that I sort of want to change. So what I would do is I would actually have this adventure, this campaign, well, I guess it's not really a campaign, it's a campaign arc. I would have it set for characters of levels 5 through 10. So instead of 1 through 5, I would have the player character start off at a high enough level that they actually feel more up to the challenges ahead of them. This also would allow some more synergy with stuff like the starter set, which this book was sort of designed to replace, but honestly, I think the starter set is a better way to introduce players to the D&D game than this particular campaign book. So I would rather have the starter set be something that would still be viable for the players to begin with before moving on to one of the hardcovers. Pretty much every other hardcover adventure that is run for like higher level ranges, like 1 through 15 or 1 through 12 or 1 through 13, whatever. The main stories don't typically start until the characters are between 3rd and 5th level anyway. So letting the players go through the starter set or something homebrewed first before moving into the adventure book, I think works a little bit better. And again, it allows the players to be a bit more of the focus. In fact, the deeds that the players have accomplished to get them to 5th level could attract the attention of Volo, who sends them a request for a meeting at the Yawning Portal. He has a job that, the character's reputation may be very beneficial to him in order to accomplish these goals, especially if, they found the lost mines of Phandelver, for example. So, it basically, like I said, allows, the characters to go through some other stuff first. So they get to Waterdeep, they get to the Yawning Portal, and instead of having the bar fight break out, honestly, I'm not really interested in the bar fight scene. You could have it if you want, but it's something that, honestly, I just wouldn't run. If you wanted to have a fight before the characters get to the tavern, then they could be attacked by bandits on their way to Waterdeep, or maybe, mugged in the streets if they're going at night, or something like that if you really wanted to run that encounter. But that's something that I'm not personally interested in doing myself. However, I would have the troll emerge, and I don't know if I would necessarily include the Sturges or not. You could, just to make things a little bit more challenging, but you could just have the troll emerge, at full health. And instead of having Durnan, the owner of the tavern, grab a greatsword and jump over the counter, something that seems kind of at odds with the way that he was described in the Tales from the Yawning Portal, where he was a bit more detached and dispassionate and fully aware that at any given time his tavern is just filled to the brim with would-be adventurers. So it seems unlikely that he would be the first one to jump into action anyway. I kind of like the idea of the troll emerging and the characters getting ready to jump into action, and you just have Durnan over in the corner, behind the bar, just cleaning a glass, not even looking at the players, and just simply saying something like, no fireballs, right? Or like, something like that, just to, let the players, again, be the focus of the encounter, and let them be the ones that have the biggest role to play. And then once that's done, you can more or less run the rest of the events as they're written within the campaign book, the little investigation sequence where they're making their way to the skewered dragon. I think that's fine. I don't have no problems with that. You could have, the run-in with the City Watch, as the City Watch is, arresting some bandits or thugs, cut purses on the streets. You can do that. You can have them go into the gnomes, curiosity shop, and then basically run the rest of the events as written. I don't see a huge reason to change any of that. Now, when it comes to the Mind Flayer, again, a few different options that you can use here. You can either have the Mind Flayer be present and simply, again, try to walk away. Now, a group of 5th level characters confronting the Mind Flayer might be a little bit more, consequential for the Mind Flayer, so he may be more inclined to try to get away since he wasn't prepared for the fight, you could say. Or you could just simply have them fight, the Mind Flayer right then and there. You could simply have it that instead of him being the major right-hand man of Xanathar or whatever, being one of the more key NPCs, he could just simply be another one of the another Mind Flayer member of the Xanathar's guild. He could be potentially high ranking, he could be the one that called for the kidnapping in the first place. And you could just have him fight alongside of the other members of the guild. Or you could have him try to get away. You could also just simply reveal that, the Xanathar's guild was guided to capture these people by, finding a piece of paper with their orders written down. Or you could have one of the men in charge of the kidnapping be speaking to a mind flare through something like a magic mirror or like a crystal orb or something that can be used. So there's other ways that you can introduce that element of it. But honestly, the first part of the adventure, there's really not a lot that I would change. The biggest thing that I would change is the level range, for one. But just let the player characters be the ones that are expected to deal with the troll. And instead of, again, having an NPC take the glory while the player characters are designated fly swatters, right? So I think that's the main thing that I would change as far as that goes. When it comes to the four villainous entities that are operating, I don't like the idea of choosing arbitrarily which one you want to focus on before the campaign even begins. I prefer the idea of having all of them active at the same time and letting the player character's actions dictate which one of these groups that they're more likely to, become the major antagonist. So if the player characters are constantly, suspecting or dealing with or running into or like going after something like the Xanathar's Guild or the Zentarum, then, you could have that be a major focus. Or you could actually have it so that the player characters disrupt enough of one of the organizations involved that they sort of end up dropping out, basically, and then the one that the players weren't focusing on could sort of jump in and take more of the glory. Of the four, I would have three of them active in this particular campaign. The Castle Lanterns, they're a cool concept. I actually like the idea of the devil worshippers trying to bargain for their children's souls to try to get them back from, the devils that their family made a deal with maybe generations ago. I like that idea, but honestly, it doesn't need to be explored in this particular adventure. Honestly, I think the Castle Lanterns would make sort of a great devious patron for the player characters getting involved in the Dungeon of the Mad Mage adventure. So I'm not really going to talk about or worry about the Dungeon of the Mad Mage campaign itself. I know that this is levels 1 through 5, and then Mad Mage is 5 through 20. So the idea is you're supposed to go from this one into Dungeon of the Mad Mage, but there's really nothing connecting the two. And there's not a huge reason for the player characters to explore the Undermountain to begin with. Like, there's some plot hooks you can use, but there's nothing overly solid. So I kind of prefer the idea of shifting the Castle Lanterns over to Dungeon of the Mad Mage, and they could simply hire the player characters to try to just find some, either like an artifact or a relic or the Hallister Blackcloak's spell book or ritual book that may give them what they need to break the pact with the devils that they made the bargain with. So I would shift them over to that campaign, and I would have the Zentarum and the Xanathar's Guild be the two major antagonists in the campaign, which is exactly how the first chapter is set up, and I think it does a really good job. And it does show that the two organizations are fighting with one another, so you kind of get the turf war. You have the Zentarum capturing Floon and Raynar, but before the characters can actually get there, Raynar had hidden away, but the Xanathar's Guild came in, killed the Zentarum members, and ran off with Floon. So it feels a bit more dynamic that way, but you don't really get any of that sense of, a dynamic living city throughout the rest of the campaign. So Chapter 1 did a much better job of creating that sense than the rest of the campaign. As far as Jarlaxle's concerned, I would definitely have him involved as well. However, he wouldn't necessarily be an antagonist. He's someone who would simply seek to help the player characters along. So if the player characters get stuck, or if they're lacking information, or they need a source, Jarlaxle can be the one to provide that information for them, on the grounds that if they manage to retrieve this large sum of gold and treasure that was stolen from the city by the previous open lord, that Jarlaxle will be the one to return it. And again, he's a charming, charismatic individual who could definitely convince the player characters that they're not going to be equipped to deal with the level of attention that they will get if they're the ones to return the gold. And I would have returning the gold be the primary motivation throughout the campaign, instead of it being something that the players are simply expected to do. You could have Volo, like, again, explain the situation to the players, and you could have the players work with the City Watch, being deputized if need be, and tasked with trying to recover this sum of gold if they can. The Watch can't dedicate manpower to chasing, tails or rumors or stuff like that, but the player characters working on behalf of the City Watch could. And then the city could offer the player characters something in exchange as well. But Jarlaxle could be, again, someone who just, lets them know that if they do that, they're going to make some powerful enemies, and they may not be prepared for the kind of response that they may gain. And instead, he could offer to take the heat for them, basically, and then he can offer them something in exchange of equal value, or something that would be something that would be worth their accepting, and letting Jarlaxle take the glory, while they get the the major benefits without fear of reprisal from other organizations. So that's basically the way that I want to run the campaign, and those aspects or concepts will hopefully be more pronounced as the campaign goes on. Like I said, this is the first chapter. This was the introductory section of the campaign. But honestly, besides just upping the level range to let the starter set still be a viable way to get the player characters up to a level where they can actually be infamous enough or well-known enough to have Volo reach out to them in the first place, and let them fight the troll themselves and be the main focus of the events that occur in Chapter 1. So, like I said, not a lot that I would necessarily change, just a few minor things, but we're off, I guess. So we're starting the series. So let me know in the comments below, what are some of the changes that you might make if you were to run Waterdeep Dragon Heist? Would you change the level range? How would you handle the antagonists of the campaign? Let me know the changes that you make specifically to Chapter 1. I don't want to get into the other chapters yet, because there's a lot of stuff that we could certainly address when we get there, but I want the focus of the comments and the changes that you might make to be specifically to the Chapter 1 that we're discussing here in this particular video. So thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you like this idea for a series, and I hope you come back for the next video. Should be within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Again, I want to space stuff out enough that it's not going to feel overwhelming with all the other stuff that I'm trying to do in the meantime. But I hope you come back for the second part, where we look at the player characters being, property owners, and some of the things that are going to go along with that. Anyway, thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all next time. Take care.